Welcome back to my podcast, Filmmaking, Actually. Ta-da! All right, so the last episode that I did was on soft and hard skills, and I kind of wanted to branch out on that. In that episode, I talked a lot about how we work on fostering those skills in our internships, and I kind of wanted to talk about why internships are so important in the film industry. And I'm talking about internships. I'm not talking about free labor where companies, grab some college student and go, great, you're our social media manager now. And they make them do all of the work of a fully trained professional social media manager and just justify not paying them because they're a quote unquote intern. Or they call it an internship and maybe they pay them minimum wage, but all they're doing is just throwing them into the workforce. It's not an actual internship. Now, for me, obviously, I'm not a labor and employment lawyer. This isn't legal advice. I'm just commenting as a business owner and as a filmmaker and as somebody who works in independent film and as someone who's done a lot of apprenticeships and had the opportunity to basically do internships. For me, per the Department of Labor, which can be looked up online, again, not legal advice, one of the things when it comes to payments for interns is the intern and the employer clearly understand that there is no expectation of compensation. Any promise of compensation, express or implied, suggests that the intern is an employee. And I think that's really important because employees are employees. They're monitored by labor and employment law. They have very specific payroll requirements, tax requirements, workers' compensation requirements. Employment is a very heavily regulated area. So are internships. But if someone is being compensated, it says it right there. Any promise of compensation, expressed or implied, suggests that the intern is an employee. There are a whole bunch of other things, and I'm not saying that there shouldn't be paid internships. I totally think there could be and should be, and I think it's great. We've partnered with organizations that are nonprofits that pay an intern directly, and then the company provides the internship. Hey, if you have the opportunity to get paid to learn, take it. In my opinion, if an intern is capable of performing work to the level of receiving payments, they're not an intern. Interns should be learning. They shouldn't just be working at a level which solely benefits the company to the point where the company should be paying them. And to be clear, in that Department of Labor guideline, it also says the intern's work complements rather than displaces the work of paid employees while providing significant educational benefits to the intern. So, like I said, I see a lot of quote unquote internships where it's literally just free labor and they're managed at a level of expected production and responsibility, like where the person's in charge of an entire job area, which is not an actual internship. I think internships are important because going back to those hard and soft skills, it really gives them space to learn those soft skills in an actual work environment. It's one thing when you're doing things for a grade. It's another thing where you're working for salary that if you lose that salary, you can no longer pay your rent. Capitalistic conversations about things like housing and food and healthcare being basic human rights, totally separate conversation. I'm just saying from this specific current point in our society, the way society works, how we are right now, housing has an expense. Food has an expense. The way you receive the means to cover that expense, unless you are randomly independently wealthy, which is a whole other conversation, you contribute something to society, and in exchange for that contribution, you get paid, aka you have a job. When you're learning, you are receiving information that is helping you become a better person in that field or whatever area you're learning in. When you have a job, you have to know how to do that job well or you will get fired. In a properly run company, your job also contributes to the overall well-being of that whole company. When you're working on a film set, your contribution is part of the overall success of the film. So technically, you do your job right, that film goes forward, that company keeps going. That's how it should be. I know there's mismanagement and problems. I'm not trying to fix the world here. I'm just talking about internships. Some things to keep in mind when you go into an internship, no matter if you're top of your class, get the perfect grades, teacher's pet, grew up in a world of everybody telling you you're amazing. One of the most, I think, humbling things when you go through life is as you step into either smaller and smaller circles or as you get more and more advanced, You go from where you're the local high school star and now you're at Juilliard, where everybody was the local high school star. I've had it happen for me. We released Names on the Wall. It hit this like huge explosion of like festival accolades, won a ton of awards. I didn't get into Sundance. And every time I go to Sundance, I'm reminded how many incredibly mind-blowing, amazing filmmakers and storytellers there are out there. And I'm not, just the best person in the room all the time. I know I have a podcast and I try to speak, from my experience on a subject, but I'm still speaking from my experience. And I do say all the time that, this is my advice. This is my experience. Do what works for you. But I'm trying to share what I've learned so that it can make it a little easier for somebody else. That doesn't mean that I'm done learning or that, I go in and watch Oppenheimer and go, I could have done that. No, I could not. I could not have done that. That movie was brilliant. And yes, so was Barbie. But when you go in on an internship, sometimes it can help you see the other level of professionalism around you in the field and see how much you can continue to grow as well. I think it's really, really important for bosses to have experience not as the boss. At our company, like at Space Dream Productions, we won't hire an executive who has not worked with us in a lower capacity. Every single person, even when we've hired in executives, they start as an apprentice. I don't care if you're the top COO in the world, you're not the top COO at Space Dream Productions. And that's not because Space Dream Productions is so amazing and magical or whatever. It's because Space Dream Productions is a very particular company. And I wouldn't expect anybody to be able to just jump from one company to another and flawlessly be able to integrate into the new company's culture, their rhythms, their patterns, knowing the ins and outs of their staff. Like, how many times has a new board somebody come in and the staff are like, oh, I hate this person. It shouldn't be like that. Having experience in the area, knowing what it's like to be the person running the cables and grabbing the lights and unloading the truck when you're scheduling the day, or even if you're just the DP and you're trying to like plan out your shot list and you know what the hours are you have for the day, when you know how much work it is to move the amount of gear that you're planning on having in that shoot, it helps you be a little bit more empathetic with your crew and it helps you be a little bit more realistic and it helps you understand also what they could run into and then as a manager, best plan to avoid the things they could run into. Being an intern gives you the opportunity to work at the very beginning of any career path. I wish sometimes, I know I got a ton of hands-on experience, but there's a lot of things I wish I had more mentorship opportunities for before I had to do them myself. I learned, it's great, and now I have this podcast and you get to learn. But it's important to know those little things, whether it's just intrinsic to that one particular project or whether it's just intrinsic to a film crew in general or to a job in general. School is great. School teaches you the theory, the academia, the ideas behind things. But if you haven't put it to practical use, sometimes it can be a little limiting. For example, I broke down a script once that I was brought in to direct and co-produce, and I renumbered the scenes because of the way we were going to shoot them. It was a really long scene, and in the scene, people come in and out. And because of the way we were scheduling and because we had different actors at different times, I broke it into like, instead of scene one being this whole long scene, it was scene one for the first part with two of the actors. And then it was scene two when one actor leaves and the other one comes in. And then it was scene three when that actor leaves and another person comes in. Just because it makes the scheduling make a little bit more sense. And it's easy for us to say, we're going to shoot this in this order so that this talent can get wrapped at this time. Anyway, I know that's not typical, and I know that's not how they teach you how to do it in film school. But again, real world application, like what is the point of a scene number? Is it so that there's a number on the page, or is it so when you're doing the talent breakdown and the scheduling and the shot list and all of that stuff, you have a point of reference and everybody knows what piece of the script you're talking about? Spoiler alert, it's the second one. The person I was working with is a film school graduate. You know, they've got a degree, and I gave them the script and they were going through the breakdown with me and they were really confused because they had renumbered the script, quote, the way they learned in school. And I completely understand why they did that and that they did that. And it completely makes sense in school. Except I'm not giving them a grade, I'm giving them a movie, and I need them to have the script in a format that we can break down, that we can schedule, that we can figure out what time we need, what talent, that we can figure out exactly how much time we have for each piece of that scene to be shot. It was a little bit more of a complex scene. There were a lot of setups. There were a lot of moving parts. I needed to be able to correctly organize that. And when I explained that, they were like, oh, why didn't they teach me that in school? No comment. So there's some things you are only going to learn by being there and actually seeing it. And when all you see is the way it's done in school or the way all your friends are doing it because they were all taught the same way, you might not see the other ways that you could be doing it. We had an intern once who was in a bachelor's program at a fairly good film school, and they were with me on set. And they asked me why I was scheduling the shots the way I was scheduling them. And I said, the way we organized them is we were shooting all over this one particular house. We were filming in about 5 or 6 different locations within the house, but we still had to move camera, move lights, set dress, set props, move things, move gear. Like people had to be in different wardrobes. They had to be in different makeup. Like it was fairly complex. And I said, because this order of moving requires the least amount of change between each step. You know, the actress is in this makeup where her hair is down, and then she's in this scene where her hair is up, because it's a lot harder for me to make her hair look naturally down after it's been pulled back and braided and hairsprayed. And now I have to have it down and loose. I'm going to need to like basically wash and dry her hair. Sometimes, because of all the different moving parts, it actually makes sense to deal with the hair change or even change the hairstyle if it makes more sense once you're looking at all the moving parts. But the reason why was, you know, it was 3 feet to move from the dining room to the living room, and then from the living room to the music area, and from the music area, then we went upstairs, and then we shot 3 different scenes upstairs because it was the least amount of movement and it was the easiest flow. And she was like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. You have to see it. You have to be on set. You have to understand all of those different moving parts. And when you're an intern, you have the space to ask those questions. If I had a shoot like that and my like professional $5,000 DP is like, why are we shooting in this order? I'd be like, seriously? Like, why am I paying you so much money? Experience, knowledge, working knowledge, practical knowledge, street smarts, there's value to that. And having that space to learn, having that space to ask the questions. Trust me, I was exhausted at the end of filming, and I sat down with that intern and we spent an hour. They'd been writing down questions all day and they were asking me like why I made the decisions that I made. And at the end of the internship, they were producing their first film. They'd put a team together, they were directing it, they'd written it, they were casting it. They were able to do all of these things. And what blew my mind is when they gave their feedback, we do like a little exit survey for interns as they're getting ready to graduate their internship with us. And one of the questions is kind of like, you know, how was their experience? What did you learn? Was this beneficial? And we asked that genuinely. We want to know. It's not worth it if it's not actually helping people to put all this work into our internship programs. And one of the things that they said was that when they were on set as a PA, as a student, working with the director and producer of another film, it got to the point where the director and producer would ask them the questions. And they usually knew the answers because of the internship, because of all the experience that they got, because of how much that they'd gotten to see firsthand and how wide their working knowledge was of a film production. So I value education. I know there's some people who do really well in a classroom environment. Your learning method should be the one that's best for you, but you can only go so far in a classroom. In a practical environment, there is going to come a time where you just need to know how it works in the real world. I mentioned this in the soft skills versus hard skills, but another thing is learning what you don't want to do. The intern who refused to proofread and would rather be fired than proofread something, they probably should not go into any field at all that involves any sort of copy editing or anything where they're going to be dealing with large bodies of written format. They shouldn't work in PR where they're going to deal with press releases. They probably shouldn't work in marketing where they're going to be dealing with marketing plans and obviously PR and press that kind of can copy over in two directions. They probably shouldn't be a journalist. They probably shouldn't work in publishing and book publishing as a book editor. There's a lot of industries that they should avoid if they would rather be fired than proofread. And that's something that you should learn when you're in college, because that's the time when you have the space to go, what am I doing with my life? What direction am I going in? You don't want to invest all that time into chasing a career path only to arrive at an office and be like, what have I done with my life? One of the things that blows my mind is we've had 2 marketing interns so far over the last several years who graduated. They had their full degree and everything. They were ready to go, and they got into the marketing field and they realized they needed to be filmmakers. Now, both of these interns did have a natural lean towards filmmaking anyway, but it is true in today's very, very visual media world, having skills as a filmmaker means that you know how to edit, you know how to film, you know how to make that content that a lot of marketing agencies are looking for. But I just thought it was really funny that it took them going through an entire college, graduating, finishing, entering the workforce, and going, whoops. And then they have to go back to college to get a film degree. I don't know. I just wonder if they had that opportunity to see more of the workforce prior to graduating, maybe they would have shifted their major and not had to go to college twice. Another thing about internships, and I know this kind of is contrary to changing your major midstream, but seeing something through. Sometimes we have a task, it's hard, we don't want to do it, we don't want to finish it, we have to deal with it. Sometimes that matters. We had an intern once who was amazing the entire time, and then right at the end of their internship, they just splattered. And, they were very open about it with us. We talked with them, kind of found out what was happening. They had taken on some extracurricular activities at school. They were moving into more advanced classes at school. I think they also had a part-time job, and they were doing their internship. Not the best time management plan. But they said the internship was really important to them, and they wanted to fix it. They wanted to see it through. They wanted to, use the time and the opportunity to work on their time management skills, to fix their organizational skills so that they could learn something from the experience and do better in the future. To this day, I have so much respect for them because they did that. And they did. We have a probation policy. We put them on a probation and made very clear how long the probation would be, what sort of action items they had to complete to finish the probation. And they did it. At first it was a struggle after a week or so. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is not working. And I was reminded that they were given several weeks for their probation, and it wasn't fair for me to just cut them off without giving them the chance. Again, that's a soft skill on my part to remember. I was like, that's right. I talked to them. I let them know, hey, we're not really seeing any change. We really want to make sure that this is the right fit for you. And they were like, no. I want to fix this. I'm going to fix this. And they did. And by the time the probation was done, they had checked every box. They had reorganized things in their own life to where they were doing better. And they graduated the internship. They successfully finished it. They got their certificate. They got their letter of recommendation. And honestly, they got my respect because they struck me as someone who I knew if faced with a problem, they're going to try to figure it out. They're going to try to solve it. That's a really, really, really admirable skill. That's not saying that you should ever hurt yourself, overextend yourself, burn yourself out. Sometimes the right thing to do is to stop, but it's not always the right thing to do. And knowing how to navigate that and having the space to navigate that where you're an intern, you're learning, you're growing into the workforce. You're not a trained professional yet. You're learning how to become a trained professional. I just personally think that's really, really, really important. And if you're expecting to just kind of glide through life, you won't make it very far. Or you won't last. Even some of the most powerful people in the world have crumbled because they weren't actually doing things right, or they weren't actually putting the work in, or they weren't actually, yes, of course, we all see bad guys win sometimes and it sucks. But for the most part, sustainability and longevity come from putting in a little bit of effort. And maybe that effort is in figuring out what accommodations you need to be able to sustain in a workforce. Maybe the effort is figuring out what path you want to take. Maybe the effort is deciding on a different path. It's your path. And whatever it is, it's going to be something that you have to figure out how to do. But One of the examples that I like to give with, the fact that we have this internship program is I will build a table. I will set the table. I will make the table accessible. I will lower or raise the table. I will make, wheelchair access and mobility aid access. I will provide interpreters. I will include audio descriptions. Like, we will make this table available, but I'm not going to drag the table up to someone's feet and pull them into a chair. Like, there does come a point where the best collaborations are the table is created and someone brings their chair or someone brings themselves. You have to come to the table at some point. And learning how to do that in an internship where you have the space to kind of question things, to reflect on things, to pick your own boundaries and go, how much of this table do I want to build? How much of this table how far do I want to chase this table? Those are questions that you really only know the answer to once you do them. And I truly think that really good internships give you that space to ask those questions and kind of figure it out. For us, our internships are very, very, very heavily focused on people learning. The first half of either an entire internship or a phase of an internship, if you're on a longer one, we expect to be holding your hand a lot. We expect to answer a lot of questions. We expect to be explaining how things work. We expect to be getting people to understand that answering an email with will do is one of the most useless uses of email in the entire universe and should never, ever, ever happen. And I don't understand why that's normalized. We require email responses once within 24 hours. If you're asked to do something and it's a longer task, there's several different options. We have task management software that we use. We have planning and organization structures that we follow. We have an email policy that outlines it. But telling someone, yeah, I'm going to do that. I know you're going to do it. I trust you. That's why you're here. It usually takes people a minute to get used to that type of stuff and to get familiar with their area, get familiar with how to work, build their soft skills. I usually liken the internships to a seesaw where when you first come, you're kind of sitting on the ground, holding most of everything on our side. And then kind of as you move through, you get a little more familiar with things, you get a little more able to do things. And we will have you, completing tasks and working in an area until you're able to comfortably and professionally do it. Once you're at a point where you've sustained and showed that this is something you could professionally do, and if we were to call you up next week and say, hi, we'd like to hire you for this job, and you could just do it with little to no supervision, obviously management supervision and the general normal supervision for a job, but I mean without the hand-holding and question answering and ironing out the bumps and getting familiar and figuring things out and answering questions that you really should know the answer to by now. Once you're able to do it, usually either the internship's done, depending on the internship, or you move on to the next phase of the internship. Some of our internships are a little bit longer, such as our marketing and PR internships, our editing internship, because there's different styles of editing. You can be a great social media editor. That doesn't mean you know how to edit a documentary or a narrative short film. And even in narrative short film, a horror and a comedy are cut completely differently. You can change the genre of a film with editing. Look up, I forget what it's called, but it's some form of, it's like remixed trailers. It's like Silence of the Lambs if it was a rom-com. And you watch the trailer and you're like, wow, this looks like a rom-com. You can change the entire vibe of a film with editing. And that's a hard skill that we teach in the internship. And you really can only learn that by doing it. Once an intern's amazing at social media editing, we're not going to have them keep editing social media forever. Once they got it, they're able to submit without needing revisions. Everything's rolling. They're doing great. Awesome. They move on to the next phase. For us, the most important things that we look for in our interns is a positive attitude, that they're willing to communicate. We understand that communicating through difficulties is a soft skill, but you have to communicate, period. You have to at least talk to us, tell us what's going on, say, I have a question. Being willing to learn, being willing to try, being able to manage those emails, being able to make deadlines. That's literally the top thing that we look for. Everything else, how good of an editor you are, how well you handle social media, how pretty your graphics are if you're working on graphic design, that's all secondary to us. We want to make sure that you're here to learn. And I personally think that most internships should be leaning on that space. I think we would have such a better workforce, such a stronger environment of people who can manage better, who can become better leaders, who can join the workforce effectively, who can navigate things, if we had more opportunities for mentorships and for things like getting hands-on experience and learning what it's like. So you don't have someone in charge where you're like, where did this person come from? Why are they in charge? And what are they doing? Because they do not understand how to do any of this. I think internships are really valuable. And I think obviously there are ways that internships can get abused and there are ways that people can misuse them. But to me, that's not a real internship. So calling it an internship is a misnomer. True internships, true opportunities to actually get hands-on experience, whether it's on set or whether it's in whatever the industry of your choice is. Obviously, this is a filmmaking podcast. Nothing will give you the same experience as working on so many different film sets and learning all of what's out there, the different ways people do things. I mean, even if you just get masterclass and you watch some of the different directing masterclasses, even some of the top industry like leaders, top directors, they still direct differently. They still do things differently. And that's okay because filmmaking is an art. It's not a science. And the more experience that you can get, the more opportunities that you have for hands-on, real world. How does this actually work? How do I actually need to number my scenes and why? Those are going to get you much further than just knowing in a world of academia what the proper format is for a screenplay. The proper format might get you in the door when you're trying to get an agent or a manager, but if your scenes aren't able to be broken down, if it takes a lot of work to make it into a shooting script, it's just all different things that's important to know. And when you know what happens in the real world when you make these little changes, do I have to put in the script that the girl's hair is in a braid? Does it need to be in a braid? Is that story relevant? Is it plot relevant? Do I just like braids, so I put it in there? If I take her hair out of a braid, does it change up some of the scheduling conflicts that we have? Does it mean I need less hairstylists and I can lower the budget a little bit? There's lots and lots and lots of moving parts to making a movie. And the more you understand them, the more you can be a live part of the fabric that's bringing that movie to life. And hopefully by doing real world internships, you get the opportunity to actually get some of that hands-on that can help you. All right. That's it. Obviously, do what's best for you. That's my opinion. That's what worked for me. That's something that I encourage. And I hope at the end of the day, you're able to make movies because that's what matters.
You've been listening to Filmmaking Actually with Koura Linda, Space Dream Productions podcast. Subscribe to us on any or all the podcast platforms. If you like what you hear, leave us 5-star ratings and positive reviews on iTunes. It helps more listeners like you discover the show. But the best thing you can do if you really like the show is tell a friend. Want to leave a comment or ask a question? Email at filmmakingactually@gmail.com. This is Stacey speaking, and remember,
Jodie Foster.
You fly back to school now, little starling.
And Anthony Hopkins in the most romantic movie of the year.
Oh, Clarice, your problem is you need to get more fun out of life.
The Silence of the Lambs.
and we'll see you next time. Bye.